Imagine having your world turned upside down in a single day. That's what happened to Luke. A young 21-year-old man with gentle curly brown hair had just found out his Oren, also a young 21-year-old man with blonde slick hair, announced he was leaving him in front of Luke's parents, Oswald. Tall, slender man with black hair and Miriam's small height. Thick weight with long chestnut curly hair. For Luke's own sister, Yasmin's slender-sized woman with wavy chestnut hair. "How could you do this to me, Oren?" Luke shouted at Oren. "We have been together for 2 years. We were high school sweethearts, and you are leaving me for her." Luke pointed at his sister, who he had once looked up to since they were kids. Now, the woman he barely recognized anymore. Suddenly, the mother Miriam slapped Luke across the face. "How could you be so damn selfish, Luke?" said Miriam. "Your sister did a lot for you when your father and I couldn't, at the time. Both of us worked hours after hours, struggling to make ends meet while your sister sacrificed her happiness by help raising you. Now that your sister finally found happiness, you're trying to take it away from her." Luke couldn't believe what his own mother was saying. Oren was his first love. Everyone knew that. So why the sudden change? "Exactly, Miriam," the father Oswald said as he stood beside Miriam. "And besides, Luke, Oren is the son of a wealthy CEO. He could help this family so much if Yasmin ends up marrying Oren." Again, not understanding how his family could suddenly act as if Yasmin's betrayal wasn't a big deal. Yasmin, who stood beside Oren, across from Luke and their parents, walked up to her brother Luke and held his hand. "First and foremost, I'm sorry, Luke," she said it in a calm voice. "I never meant to betray you, but I can't hide my feelings for Oren anymore." She then looked back at Oren, who then smiled at her. "But what Oren and I have is way more special than what you and Oren had." Luke quickly moved his hand away from Yasmin. His head was spinning and his heart was breaking. The family he once loved and all took turns betraying him. Luke ran out of the house and ran into the rainy night. Oren was about to stop him, but Yasmin grabbed Oren's arm to stop him from going after Luke. However, promised Oren that Luke will be back eventually. Betrayed by family and love, Luke found himself wandering in the cold rain, tears mixing with raindrops. He still couldn't believe how his family betrayed him, but fate had different plans that night. Eric, Oren's father, a distinguished, tall, muscular tone, with slick, dirty blonde hair that looked like he's in his 40s, spotted Luke from his car. "What happened?" Eric's concerned voice cut through the rainfall. When Luke broke down and shared everything that happened between him, Oren, and Luke's family, Eric's protective instincts kicked in. He gets in the car with Luke as he reached over to Luke's word cheek and caressed him softly. "From now on, I'll protect you," he promised. Eric then drove away with Luke that night. The very next day, while Eric was resting in his leather office chair, Oren carefully walked in with Yasmin. Eric looked at his son as if he had a death wish for coming into his office unannounced. When Eric asked what did he want, while rubbing his tired eyes after staying up most of the night to watch over Luke, Oren asked his father's approval to wed Yasmin. Eric's face darkened as he remembered Luke's tears. Eric stood up from his chair, slammed his hands on the desk. "Oren, you cannot be serious. Isn't this your fiancée's older sister? How dare you come to my office asking for my approval when you're supposed to be married to Luke? Are you trying to ruin the family's reputation?" Eric then threw his pen directly to Oren, but it missed when Oren ducked away from the attack. "Father, I love Yasmin, and we want to be together. What's wrong with that? What is wrong is that dumping your ex to get with the sister instead is frowned upon when you're in the public's eye," Eric replied. He then placed his hand in his pockets and walked over to his glass wall window to view the city. Yasmin was getting ready to protest, but looking at Oren's glance at her, she decided to go against it. "Look, father," Oren says while holding Yasmin's hand with pride, "whether you like it or not, I love Yasmin, and we are going to get married. And if I must, I'll write a statement about my relationship with Yasmin, so she and I can go public." Eric then looked at his son, but this time with determination. He walked over to Yasmin and Oren, as he stood tall over them with his one hand in his pocket. "Marry her, and you're no longer my son." Both Yasmin and Oren were shocked at Oren's father's ultimatum. Was he serious? Oren, tall blonde hair, 21-year-old young man holding hands with his new fiancée Yasmin. Slender toned body with wavy brunette hair, having a shocked expression on his face. His father Eric just informed Oren that if he weds Yasmin and go against Eric, who is tall, muscle-toned CEO with dirty blonde hair that's in his 40s, then Oren will no longer be the son of the wealthy CEO. Yasmin was just as surprised to hear Oren's father's ultimatum. Oren was confused. His father was acting like this over another man's feelings. Because his father had liked Luke and had already considered Luke his family when Oren and Luke dated even back in high school. Still, it wasn't fair to Oren and to Yasmin if Eric is pressuring Oren to marry Luke, all because of Oren's past history with Luke. This thought just made Oren even more upset. It just proved how Eric continues to try to control Oren's life. Something Oren always dreaded. Then you do what you have to do, Father Oren said, with his head held high. Because at the end of the day, I will marry Yasmin. He then held her hand tight as he walked out of the office with Yasmin. The father was mad and sat back in his leather office chair. He then ran a thought. Of course he's glad that his son Oren finally left Luke, since Luke can do so much better than Oren. That wasn't the problem. The problem was how Oren went about it. Leaving Luke, breaking his heart. Why? So that Oren could have a happy life with Eric's money. No, that wasn't going to happen. And he will make sure of it. Later that day, Eric came home in his villa home. As the maids and butler greeted him home from work. Where is Luke? Eric asked one of the maids, and took off his suit jacket and handed it to the butler. I believe Hayes still in the guest room sleeping. Sir, one of the maids replied. Shall I go wake him? Eric thought about what the maid had just asked him. It was no question Luke went through a lot emotionally with his family. Plus Uri had to add more stress to Luke by dumping him. No need, he replied. He will come downstairs when Hayes awake and ready. Later, Luke, who has curly chestnut hair and the same age as Eric's son Oren, woke up from a nightmare about last night. When Oren left Luke for Yasmin and his parents allowed it to happen, Luke held his legs in bed while crying. Eric then walked in after hearing Luke's cries and sat beside him on the bed and held him for comfort. Luke hated what Oren and Luke's family did to Luke, but most importantly, Luke hated to feel weak and victimized, but had to admit, being under a man like Eric, while being embraced from a strong arms like Eric's, felt extremely nice. Luke finally stopped crying, pulled away and thanked Eric for helping him last night and wondered if there was anything he could do for Eric. Eric had a thought. He was planning to tell him. But maybe Luke can help him. Luke asked again in case Eric didn't hear him. Eric then looked into Luke's eyes and asked Luke to marry him instead. Luke was baffled at Eric's request. Eric, a wealthy 40-year-old CEO, sat beside Luke on the bed. Just yesterday, Luke, 21-year-old chestnut curly hair, was once engaged to Eric's son Oren, also 21 tall with blonde hair, and now here Eric and Luke were discussing marriage. The 21-year-old couldn't believe his ears when Eric, hit brown eyes, with a striking good looks and blonde hair, proposed this unusual arrangement. Please, Luke. Eric's voice was soft but urgent, explaining how this marriage would protect his assets from Oren. Luke's mind raced. This man had rescued him from the rain just last night, when he had nowhere else to go, and now this. After a moment's hesitation, looking into Eric's earnest eyes, Luke whispered, okay. The next day, standing outside the courthouse, Luke stared at their names on the marriage certificate, his chestnut curls falling over his worried eyes. We're actually married, he breathed, as Eric gently took his hand. Worry fell onto Eric's FAQ when he couldn't help looking at Luke's also worried expression when staring at the marriage certificate. Any second thoughts? Eric, as while staring at Luke. Luke finally stopped staring at the certificate and looked up at no longer his ex, soon-to-be father-in-law, but now his husband. Luke shook his head while smiling slightly. No, I'm okay, he said to Eric while touching Eric's shoulder. You helped me last night and I helped you. Eric forgotten just at the moment that this mirage is only just a favored act. Nothing more, which made Eric feel a bit disappointed. Not to Luke but at himself for letting his mind go that far into thinking this marriage was anything but a favor. Just then Luke gets a call. He takes his cell phone out of his pocket and answers it. Yeah, hello? Luke asked. It was his mother, Miriam. Middle-aged, chestnut curly hair on the phone with Luke. Well then I'm glad you still answer the phone, Miriam said sarcastically. I was afraid you had already forgotten about your own mother. Luke sighed while pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration, while still on the phone with his mother. Of course, Mom, Luke said, as he suddenly noticed Eric moving closer to Luke to listen to his conversation with Luke's. Luke pretended he didn't notice yet, move a bit further away from Eric. Eric took the hint and waited. It's your sister's birthday, and we plan to celebrate it tonight at a banquet. Your father and I pinched in to give her a grand birthday, and we need you to pinch in as well. And why on earth would I do that? Luke asked his mother in a sarcastic tone. Miriam was appalled at Luke's response. What do you mean, why should you? Yasmin is your sister. And may I remind you that Yasmin did a lot for this family when she didn't need to. She could have had a life of her own to explore, but unlike you, she wasn't selfish. She helped your father and I take care of your ungrateful ass. Oh, I'm being ungrateful. Luke shouted on the phone to his mother. Suddenly, the anger was building up, yet also his heart was breaking. I'm being ungrateful. How could you be on the phone saying that to me right now? Did you forget that as I gotten older and turned 14? I end up having 2 jobs just to help you and father pay half of the bills in the house. You didn't think watching you guys struggle with money didn't affect me. And Yasmin, when she didn't have money for her college tuition, who was the one took a few night shifts just to get extra cash to give it to Yasmin to finally help her pay for college? Luke's tears couldn't stop spilling from his eyes. Yet Eric, who watched Luke getting upset, noticed a crowd watching them one by one as they walked by from Luke and Eric. Eric held Luke's hand and tried to calm him down. But did I get a thank you? No. Why the hell should we? Shouted Miriam on the phone with Luke. You are our son. You're supposed to do these things for us. Luke began to chuckle while crying. Every words were spilling out from his mother kept hurting Luke. This was the same mother who was Fiancée gentle to Luke, who loved and cared for him. His father, his sister, and even Oren. His love, his soulmate, so he thought. But each and every one of them that once loved him were all against him. Eric could still hear Luke's mother yelling at Luke, but can't understand a word. He gently took the phone from Luke's hand, hung up the phone as he embraced Luke in Eric's arms. My word is my bond, Luke, Eric says as Eric closed his eyes and placed his lips on Luke's ear and whisper. I said I would protect you from them, and I meant it. Luke could hear every promising word coming from Eric's lips through Luke's ear. Eric's words calmed Luke's heart and stopped his tears. He thought only his ex-fiancée had this type of talent. Now that Hayes married to Eric, the richest, most powerful CEO in the city, he could see now where Oren had gotten his talent from. In the dim light of their living room, Miriam and Oswald sat together, their hearts heavy with the weight of family drama. Miriam, her chestnut curls framing her tear-stained face, had just hung up after another heated argument with their son Luke. That tyrant, she exclaimed, her voice trembling. You should be grateful I still want him home for Yasmin's birthday. Yasmin was their oldest child that was in their early 30s with dark brown curly hair. Miriam buried her face in Oswald's chest, his salt and pepper hair catching the soft lamplight. Oswald held his wife close, but guilt gnawed at him. Their son Luke and Oren, 21-year-old, tall with blonde hair, had been high school sweethearts. Oren had even proposed on Luke's 21st birthday. But now, Oren would be marrying their daughter Yasmin instead. We're doing the right thing, Miriam whispered, a small smirk playing on her lips. Yasmin deserves happiness, and Luke... Luke will find someone else. He'll forget all about Oren. You're right, Miriam said Oswald, with a smile. As mad as we are at him right now, she being selfish. I'm sure he will come around once he finds someone new. And yes, they were exactly right. Luke would eventually move on from Oren and be with someone else. Little did they know that someone would be the tall, handsome, 40-something-year-old CEO with dirty blonde hair. Also Oren's father, Eric. Later that night, Luke, chestnut curly hair, 21-year-old young man walked downstairs after taking a warm bath from being so upset from earlier. After being on the phone with his mother Miriam. By the time he reached downstairs, he noticed a maid that approached to him. Hello, Master Luke, I'm Miranda. Miranda says with pride. Miranda had on her maid outfit, but left her red flowing long hair down to her back. Luke thought she looked amazing. Can I get you anything, sir? Luke was confused. Why was this maid calling Luke master? But he brushed it aside for now, and began looking left and right for someone. The maid noticed. Have you seen Eric? Luke asked. The maid smiled and nodded. Yes, he is in the kitchen now making dinner for you too. A confused look placed on Luke's face again. Just the two of us? Luke asked. The maid nodded in reply. Yes, sir. He especially wanted all the domestics to leave the kitchen and not serve you both for the rest of the night. Since you two are married, he wanted to show you how well he can be as a proper husband. Luke was baffled. This marriage is only a favor until Eric will eventually find someone to love, and then they could get a divorce. Luke didn't think Eric going all out for Luke was necessary. But after peeping out from the hallway and into the kitchen doorframe and watched Eric with an apron on making delicious dinner for just the two of them, made Luke feel somehow special. Eric then noticed Luke, and stumbled a bit for feeling embarrassed after Luke had been watching him for a while. Luke giggled with delight after watching Eric being a bit clumsy. I didn't hear you, Luke," said Eric as he scratched the back of his own head from embarrassment. Luke then walked up to Eric as he viewed the food he cooked. "Yeah, so I just sent the domestics, maids and butlers home, so it could just be you and I together." Luke then looked into Eric's eyes. "You did this for me?" Luke asked as Eric looked into Luke's eyes. "I did it for us, double quotes," Eric replied. They were both somehow enchanted by each of their eyes staring at one another. Luke wasn't sure why his heart was beating so fast. Yet for Eric had liked Luke for so long. A year to be exact. But after discovering his feelings, he chose not to act on it till now. There were so many reasons why he chose to not act on it, but one was certain. He didn't want Luke to hate Eric for loving Luke. Suddenly Miranda cleared her throat, and instantly Luke and Eric pulled away, as they realized they were getting closer to their lips being touched. "Sorry to interrupt," said Miranda, "but my Uber is here, and it'll just leave you two alone. Ciao." She then left the villa as Luke looked away, blushing while Eric blushed as well, and chuckled at the embarrassment. They both looked at each other again, and chuckled. "You mind if I help set the table?" Luke asked as he began touching the white plates beside Eric on the kitchen counter. "Oh yeah, sure, if you want." Luke grabbed only 2 plates as he walked over to the dining room to set up beneath the table. Eric couldn't help watching Luke walking away. He knew their marriage wasn't real in Luke's eyes, but he has hopes that maybe soon, he will be ready to share his true feelings to Luke. After dinner, Eric, 40-something-year-old tall, dirty blonde-hair man, and his young 21-year-old chestnut curly-hair husband, named Luke, gathered the dishes and washed them together. They even had a little fun by playing bubble fights with each other. However, after the kitchen was done, Luke was about to walk upstairs to go to bed, but Eric stopped him by the hallway. He then touched Luke's fingertips. This made Luke stop at his tracks, turn to look up at Eric, as Eric looked down at Luke's eyes. "I'm in love with you, Luke," Eric said as his voice began to shake with nerves. Luke was shocked. He knew what he heard, but at the same time, didn't. "Luke, did you hear me? I said I'm in love with you." Luke was so stunned he couldn't utter a word at the moment. Eric chuckled with embarrassment. "I know this is so sudden, but I felt that I needed to tell you, otherwise I might die." Luke's world turned upside down. Here was his ex-father, the man he'd entered a marriage of convenience with, telling him he'd fallen in love. Luke's heart raced, but the wounds from his breakup with Oren, 21-year-old, tall with slick blonde hair, were still fresh. "I need time," Luke managed to whisper, feeling Eric's warm hand grasp around Luke's. "Take as much time as you need," said Eric. He then took a step so he was closer to Luke. Luke's eyes looked up at Eric as Eric's hand gently touched Luke's cheek. "I'm right here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." Meanwhile, across town, drama unfolded at Luke's childhood home. Yasmin, 30-something-year-old slender woman with curly dark brown hair, walked in with Oren, only to find their parents, Miriam, middle-aged chestnut curly-hair woman, and Oswald, middle-aged slick salt and pepper hair, in a state of fury. "Luke is banished from this house until he can learn to respect his elders," they declared. Despite knowing her relationship with Oren had hurt her brother, Yasmin couldn't bear to abandon Luke. But as she reached for her phone to call Luke, her father snatched her cell phone away. "Leave him alone," they insisted, believing isolation would bring their son back. Little did they know, Luke was already finding love in the most unexpected place. By us continue leaving him in the streets, or wherever he's at, he's gonna realize he needs us, Oswald said, while still holding Yasmin's phone. "Your father is right," Yasmin said Miriam, as she stood beside Oswald. "And once he does come back, he'll realize he was wrong and beg for your forgiveness. Beg for all of our forgiveness." She says it with a smile. Both the parents had and still do love their son Luke. But they love money more. At the time, they couldn't accept their son Luke being gay. And they didn't like Oren as much when they first met him, as Luke's boyfriend. But after finding out who Oren's father was, which is the CEO of a high-ranked company in the city, Eric, they knew they hit the jackpot. So they continued to allow their son to date Oren. But when Yasmin and Oren had an affair, the year after Oren had proposed to Luke, both Miriam and Oswald kept quiet about it, and allowed the affair to happen until Luke caught them in the act, in Oren and Luke's house. Yasmin knew that marrying the love of her life, Oren, would benefit the family. But she couldn't help to think if she'd go through with the wedding, then Luke will never forgive her. "Your brother is going to be fine," says Oren. "I overheard from our friends that they saw Luke going into a car with someone today." Maybe it's one of his friends he's staying with for now. You see, darling, says Miriam, it's going to be fine. Let Luke suffer without us. Only then he will realize his wrongs, and he will come back to us. He will realize you and Oren belong together. Yasmin understood, yet couldn't help feeling guilty. The next morning, Luke got dressed and head out the door to go to work, just to avoid Eric for now. But just as he quietly tried to reach the door, someone stood right behind him. And where do you think you're going? Said Eric, whisper it to the back of Luke's ear. The sudden deep voice surprised Luke as he quickly turned to face Eric, but tripped over his own feet and almost fell backwards. But with a one swift move, Eric quickly wrapped his arm around Luke's lower back and pulled him close. Both of their faces was inched close to each other as they both looked into each other's eyes. Eric, with a longing look, stared down at Luke's brown eyes, while Luke looked up at Eric's dark green eyes. Luke then slowly wrapped his arm around Eric's neck, as he continued to fall into a trance. Suddenly, Oren and Yasmin appeared at the front door. What the fuck is going on? Said Oren in a shocked tone. Suddenly, still at the same positions, they quickly looked at the front door and saw Oren and Yasmin. Luke and Oren then looked at each other. Luke had always known Oren and Yasmin would eventually find out about him and Eric being together. They just didn't expect it. It will be this soon.